Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. Former President Mahinda Rajapakse looks at fresh inroads to political relevance in voting for the Sri Lankan parliamentary elections on Monday. Rajapakse poses the biggest challenge to Ranil Wickremesinghe's government. Afghanistan gripped by a wave of Taliban violence as the Taliban Afghanistan peace process grinds to a near halt. The Afghan government and people squarely blame Pakistan for exporting terror. Turkey being pulled into simultaneous war against Islamic State and Kurds. Collapse of ceasefire with PKK reprisals by militants raises havoc in a spiraling cycle of violence. Massive explosions at a chemical warehouse in Chinese port city leave a trail of death and devastation. Blasts reported as a seismic event so big that they could be seen by satellites in space. And it's primary season in the United States. In the run-up to the November 2016 presidential elections, a record number of White House hopefuls this time look to make an impact with credentials and approach to national issues. Well, our top focus on the program this week. The stage is set for parliamentary elections in Sri Lanka on Monday, with former President Mahinda Rajapakse making a desperate attempt to storm back into political reckoning in the island nation. Rajapakse, who lost to his cabinet minister Maithripala Sirisena in the presidential election in January, has wagered big, choosing to contest a high-voltage election being held 10 months ahead of schedule. If he carries the polls, Rajapakse will likely become Sri Lanka's prime minister, putting him in an awkward company of Sirisena as president. The path seems tough for Rajapakse as Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is said to be leading in opinion polls. Sri Lankans will elect 225 MPs to the country's parliament. The new parliament is to meet for the first time on the 1st of September. Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about the Sri Lankan elections is senior journalist Rajesh Sundarraj. Rajesh, thank you for joining me on the program. Will, Maithripala Sirisena, of course, has done extremely well, but the question really is, will his counterpart make a comeback into politics once again?
Well, it seems highly unlikely because you've got, the issues that brought the president into power earlier this year. Those remain as they are. The Rajapakse regime was seen as one that was extremely brutal. It was repressive. It was a corrupt government. It was seen as a corrupt government. It was seen as a government which, where the family of the Rajapakses had all the positions. There was a lot of nepotism. And that continues to be the kind of negatives that are going against Mahinda Rajapakse at this time. And the prospects of Wickremesinghe seem much brighter, especially if you consider the polls that are coming out right now.
Indeed, but the question really is, if at all, if he pulls a rabbit out of his hat and then he wins the election, then he has to face the awkward situation of working with someone he just defeated, someone who defected from his party and went on to become the president of Sri Lanka.
Well, there is a mathematical probability of that happening because a vast majority of the Sinhalese voters do support Mahinda Rajapakse.
Yes.
But I think the president has already made clear that if Mahinda Rajapakse were to be in a position where he stakes his claim to be the prime minister, he's going to reject that claim. So it's going to be very tough for him. Even if he were to get the numbers that are required to pull him through. There are, within his party, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, there are a lot of opponents that he has. And it's going to be extremely tough for him. Many of the pundits would put their money on Wickremesinghe coming back and being the Prime Minister.
Indeed. And what do you think are the factors that are going to influence these polls?
Well, as far as the Tamils there are concerned, I think there is a continued rejection of the Rajapakse regime, and I think that is something that will in some way benefit with the UNP-led alliance, and it's going to benefit Wickremesinghe because there's no way that in any scenario post-poll, they would support Rajapakse in any way. Of course, there is three political parties on the Tamil side which are staking a claim for the Tamil vote. But the TNA will, I believe, be the strongest of the three claimants this time around, and they will throw their weight behind Ranil Wickremesinghe. But it is not going to be a close fight. I think it's going to be a fight where Mahinda Rajapakse knows that he has a very slim chance of winning, and he knows he's got his hands tied behind his back.
You know, I know it's difficult to say in politics, but in January, of course, of this year, when Mahinda Rajapakse lost the election, he went back and said that he's going to retire, not come back into politics, said he's going to hang up his boots. But now here he is contesting for these particular elections. If he loses, is it the end of the road for him? Will he not come back ever into politics, or do you see that not happening at all?
I think there's a lot of desperation, if you see, because, you know, there are a whole lot of cases that are pending against him, including the one that has come about a rugby player who was murdered. The charges are that it's the regime that was responsible for it. Apart from that, there are war crimes. There are journalists who've disappeared. White vans, a whole lot of human rights abuses, a whole lot of corruption cases that are there. And I think the Rajapakse family, especially former President Mahinda Rajapakse, knows that until they have political power, they will always be the sword hanging not only on his head, but the head of his family. So there is a desperation which is bringing them back into the electoral race, and they know that they have the support of a large majority of the Sinhalese, because they represent Sinhala chauvinism, which finds a lot of resonance among the Sinhalese population of Sri Lanka.
And he's still looked at as a hero by many of the Sinhalese there in Sri Lanka. But, you know, as far as these elections go, what does it mean really for India and China?
As far as China is concerned, with the exit of Mahinda Rajapakse in the last elections, they have lost a huge amount of their strategic upper hand which they had. Since the election results came out, it's India and the United States, the West really, which has got an upper hand. But having said that, the Chinese haven't really lost out. There were a few contracts that they lost, but there is a commitment from the current government that they will not they will not throw the baby and the bathwater. Yes. They will look at the fine print. They will see whether the charges of corruption do stand out. And if they don't, they will let those investments be. So, yes, the Chinese do not have much at stake here. They know that the horse that they backed has lost. Yes. Chances that he's going to win again this time are very bleak. But they haven't lost as much as they would have thought initially, you know, because strategically they've got a few key investments going, and they are continuing to engage with the current dispensation, and they hope that they will be able to minimize the losses.
Indeed. All right, Rajesh, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us on the program this week and putting things into perspective for us. Well, moving on now, the Taliban is running wild in Afghanistan, killing and maiming Afghan soldiers on an almost daily basis. The Afghan government has laid the blame squarely on Pakistan, asking it to mend its ways, even as the US pushes for greater Pakistan-Afghanistan cooperation against terror. Here's more.
The ugly aftermath of the car bomb explosion at the entrance to the Kabul airport on Monday, 5 killed, including women and children, dozens injured. This one was the 4th suicide attack in the Afghan capital in 4 days. In violence-wrecked Afghanistan, the tears refuse to dry, the shock refuses to fade. Days earlier, 3 bombs had exploded one after the other, killing at least 50. More than 400 were wounded. The renewed Taliban killing spree has raised fresh fingers, pointing at Pakistan's hand of support to the terrorist insurgents.
Pakistan د نړیوال تروریزم حامی د هغې سپورټر د هغې سپانسر او د هغې روزونکی او همدارنګه افغانستان او نور نړۍ ته د هغې واردونکی هیواد د هر چاته تر لمر روښانه ده.
And as of now, any hopes of a peace process stand grounded. The Taliban postponed the second round of talks with the Afghan government indefinitely after announcement of Mullah Omar's death. The insurgent group itself is in disarray with an ugly power struggle ripping through its ranks. As Pakistan continues to push in more trained terrorists through its porous border with Afghanistan, Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani has said the coming weeks could be a turning point in Afghanistan's struggle for peace.
حوادث 2 مای اخیر به طور عام و روزهای اخیر به طور خاص نشان داد که هنوز لانه‌های تربیت انتحاری و فابریکه‌های ساخت بم‌های که مردم بیگناه ما را تصامیمی که دولت پاکستان در هفته‌های آینده می‌گیرد می‌تواند بر روابط دو کشور در دهه‌های آینده تاثیرگذار باشد.
The United States has stepped in too, calling for lowering of Pakistan-Afghanistan tensions, asking leaders of both the countries to work together to combat violent extremism. It is in the urgent interest of both countries to eliminate safe havens and to reduce the operational capacity of the Taliban on both sides of the border. A United Nations report says 1,592 Afghan civilians were killed as a result of armed conflict in the first half of this year. A marginal drop in deaths, more women and children killed than before. Over 3,000 civilians sustained injuries. The report notes a continued failure on the part of the administration to protect civilians.
Conflict-related violence took a particularly heavy toll on women and children. While the overall increase in civilian casualties reached 1%, women casualties increased by 23%, and children casualties increased by 13%.
In the past, Kabul has been drawing closer to Islamabad, assuming that only a cooperative equation between the two can really pave the way for a settlement with the Taliban. Recent development and violence, however, suggest another face to that picture. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, we'll slip into a short break now, but still to come. Violence erupts again in Ferguson, Missouri on the first anniversary of the Michael Brown shooting incident. That and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, it's been a wave of violence in Turkey this last week on the back of its twin-pronged anti-terror offensive against Islamic State jihadists and Kurd militants. Reprisals by Kurd militants in Istanbul raised havoc in an escalating cycle of violence. For Turkey's US allies, the positives of access to airfields to carry out airstrikes against the IS in Syria and Iraq comes with a forced opening of a front against Kurds, something the Americans may not have wanted.
Mounting terror in Turkey capital Istanbul, the US consulate attacked by two left-wing militants, one of them a woman. Hours later, a suicide bomber detonates a car packed with explosives at a police station, injuring 10 people, including 3 officers. And on the same day, 4 Turkish police officers are killed in a roadside bomb attack. Pictures of mayhem that extended to clashes between Kurdish militants and police on the streets of Istanbul, and militants targeting a helicopter in Sirnak. Much of this violence was unleashed by extremist left parties and Kurd militants within the country. The Turkish military attack on the Kurdish PKK has virtually wiped out hopes of a ceasefire between the two. Kurdish leaders blame the Turkish political establishment for the mess.
Şu anda ülkedeki en büyük çılgınlık AKP tarafından dayatılan çılgınlıktır. Başka da bize savaş dayatan yok. Toplum barış istiyor. PKK barış yapmaya hazır olduğunu ilan ediyor. Dolmabahçe'de müzakere hazır olduğunu ilan ediyor.
Then there's the America factor. Turkey opening up the Incirlik air base to US F-16s has led to stepped-up American airstrikes against IS targets in Syria and Iraq. 6 of these fighter jets and nearly 300 US personnel are in Turkey for the offensive, but the US denies any agreement on a safe zone. Here again, distinct strategic dichotomies arise. While Turkish forces target the PKK Kurds in Iraq, Kurdish groups are a key ally for the US against the Islamic State in Syria. In Iraq, Kurdish Peshmerga fighters, separate from the PKK and YPG, have been praised by many US lawmakers for their success in fighting the Islamic State. The change in Turkey's stand, allowing its territory to be used against the Islamic State, marks a major strategic shift, one that makes it a target for both the Kurds and the IS.
Amerika uzun süreden beri aslında bu üslerin, özellikle İncirlik üssünün kullanılması noktasında Türkiye'ye talepte bulunuyordu ama Türkiye o günün şartlarında DAEŞ ya da IŞİD.
Yani Türkiye bu koalisyonda olmalı. Çünkü en çok zarar gören ülkelerden bir tanesi. Sınırımızda her şey oluyor, bitiyor. Bombalar patlıyor. Yazık, bizim insanlığımız ölüyor orada. Dolayısıyla tabii ki memnunum.
Strategic affairs watchers say the violence in Turkey is the outcome of a combination of domestic politics, involvement in regional conflicts, and the pulls and pressures of global alliances. And it's unlikely to be sorted out soon.
Seçimin sonucunda PKK'nın güçlenerek çıkması ama hükümetin ve iktidar partisinin güç kaybetmiş olması ve Erdoğan'ın projesinin hayata geçme şansının kalmaması sonuçta bu projenin, daha doğrusu bu barış görüşmelerinin ya da çözüm sürecinin kesintiye uğramasına sebep oldu.
There's a rising outcry within Turkey for an end to the violence that's nascent yet threatening to overwhelm. Fears have also arisen of the country being sucked in to the mayhem in Iraq and Syria. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Let's now take a look at some other news-making events that made headlines across the world this past week in our segment Global Watch.
Massive explosions at a chemical warehouse in the Chinese port city of Tianjin on Thursday killed over 50 people and injured nearly 700, leaving a devastated landscape of incinerated cars, toppled shipping containers, and burnt-out buildings. The blast happened at a storage facility for dangerous chemical goods. A vast fireball from the explosion dwarfed cars in the area and rained debris on the city. The first blast was reported to be of the intensity of 3 tons of TNT, and second the equivalent of 21 tons. The blast was even picked up by a Japanese weather satellite. Unrest broke out in Ferguson in Missouri after clashes broke out between police and demonstrators on the first anniversary of the killing of Michael Brown on Monday. Police shot and critically injured 18-year-old Tyrone Harris after the black teenager allegedly opened fire at officers. St. Louis County Police Department said they arrested more than 20 people during the clashes, in addition to 120 other demonstrators who were arrested elsewhere in the city. Michael Brown, an unarmed black 18-year-old, was fatally shot by a white Ferguson police officer during a confrontation a year back. A massive truck bomb ripped through a popular Baghdad food market in a predominantly Shiite neighborhood early on Thursday morning, killing at least 67 people. 152 people were wounded in the attack. The market is the main center for produce and food sales in the Iraqi capital. The blast incinerated much of the market, leaving charred wooden market stalls and scattering fruits and vegetables far around it. The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the blast, saying it targeted a gathering place of Shiite and vowed more attacks. Astronauts took the first bites of food grown entirely in space and harvested from their own space garden on board the International Space Station. The 2 NASA and 1 Japanese astronaut toasted their 3 pieces of lettuce before their first bites. The harvest comes from NASA's Wedge 01 experiment aimed at studying how plants grow in orbit in order to give astronauts on possible longer missions in the future the ability to grow their own meals and fresh produce in space. Half of the produce will be packaged, frozen, and sent back to Earth at a later date where it will be analyzed by scientists.
Well, we'll slip into another short break now, but the race hots up for the Best Footballer in Europe award for 2014-15. The top 3 have been named. That and much more coming up on the other side. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, the presidential primary season in the United States is in full swing ahead of selection of a nominee each for the Democrats and Republicans and US presidential elections in November next year. It's a big playing field too, over a dozen Republican contenders and nearly half that number among the Democrats. The candidates seek to differentiate themselves on credentials and approach to a gamut of national issues, with some interesting, often amusing battles underway. Here's more.
ISIS grew while the United States disengaged from the Middle East and ignored the threat. And where was the Secretary of State? Where was Secretary of State Clinton in all of this?
Jeb and Hillary, on the same day, They said Donald Trump has too strong a tone, too strong.
I'm worried about what Republican policies would do to the rest of America's women, and I will continue to speak out and speak up about that.
We are going to create an economy that works for all people, not just a handful of billionaires.
Ambitious politicians competing for the cameras, a frantic drive to build name recognition, raise funds, woo voters, and secure endorsements. That's what the United States primaries are all about. Tumult around the primaries have been the norm for several presidential cycles in the United States, ahead of parties choosing their nominee for the final fight. And the 2016 contest, particularly among the Republicans, is already the most keenly fought, at least in terms of numbers. Out of 16, a whopping 9 are standing or former governors, all looking to show themselves worthier not only than the opposition Democrats, but also their fellow Republican hopefuls. Candidates look to differentiate themselves on issues like taxes, education, foreign policy, and spending. Jeb Bush, brother of former President George Bush and former Florida governor, is among 16 Republican hopefuls in the race. In defense of the former president, he says the present administration shares the blame for rise of the Islamic State.
Who can seriously argue that America and our friends are safer today than in 2009, when the President and Secretary Clinton, the storied team of rivals, took office? So eager to be the history makers, they failed to be the peacemakers.
There's also real estate mogul and reality TV star Donald Trump, creating ripples and stirring a hornet nest with comments on supporting women's health, defending criticism of his tone, and comments on candidates sold out to industry.
I said, what would Jeb do? And Hillary, and by the way, all the politicians, just let's use one as an example, okay? All of them. Because they're all controlled, 100%. We have heads being chopped off because they're Christian in the Middle East. We have borders where people are being killed all over. The world is cracking up, and they're worried about my tone. I should be toned down.
On the other side of the fence are the Democrats. Former First Lady Hillary Clinton and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders are among the heavyweights of the 5 candidates who have thrown their hat into the ring so far. Clinton, who leads the race, has been under political fire just lately for allegedly using her private email for classified work, sidestepping transparency and record-keeping laws. Her computer servers are being investigated. But that takes nothing away from her lashing out at the Republican approach to the issues on the table.
They brag about slashing women's health care funding. They say they would force women who've been raped to carry their rapist's child. And we don't hear any of them supporting raising the minimum wage, paid leave for new parents, access to quality child care, equal pay for women, or anything else that will help to, give women a chance to get ahead.
The challenge is to stand above the crowd in the primaries without alienating the moderates who will be needed should the candidate win the presidential nomination, to be decided in July next year. That Republican versus Democrat battle will be the last leg of the race to the White House. These are the heats, as it were. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, let's now get you up to speed with some big events this week from the sporting arena in our sports wrap. Barcelona's Uruguay forward Luis Suarez was on Wednesday named on a 3-man shortlist for UEFA's Best Player in Europe award for 2014-15. The 28-year-old joined perennial top player nominees Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Suarez's Barca teammate Messi won the inaugural UEFA Best Player in Europe award in 2011, while Real Madrid's Ronaldo is the current holder. Messi is the big favourite as Barcelona won the treble of Champions League, La Liga and Copa del Rey last season, while he helped Argentina reach the Copa America final. The award will be handed out in Monaco on August 27th. Nick Kyrgios has apologized after being fined $10,000 for an insulting remark he made to Stanislav Wawrinka during their Rogers Cup match. On-court microphones apparently picked up Kyrgios making a lewd suggestion about Wawrinka's girlfriend. The French Open champion Wawrinka said it was unacceptable and called for the Australian to be punished. The Association of Tennis Professionals said that the fine was the maximum on-site amount, adding it was still reviewing the matter and additional penalties may be forthcoming. 28 athletes tested positive and have been provisionally suspended after their doping samples from the 2005 and 2007 World Championships were reanalyzed. Track and Field's governing body IAAF did not name any of the athletes who produced 32 positive findings in tests from the 2005 Championships in Helsinki and the 2007 meeting in Osaka. The IAAF said none of the athletes will be competing in the upcoming World Championships in Beijing, which begin on August 22nd. The Indian hockey team ended their European tour on a high as they comfortably beat Spain 4-2 in the final encounter to win the 3-test series by a margin of 2-1. Forward Ramandeep Singh turned out to be the hero with double strikes within a minute's gap. Drag flicker Rupinder Pal Singh and Akashdeep Singh were the other scorers for the Indian team. For Spain, Ricardo Santana and Xavier Leonard were the scorers. And finally, of course, spare a thought for zoo animals battling the summer heat. Doing just that are officials at a facility in South Korea providing ice food packs and showers. I'll leave you with these cooling off visuals. See you again next time.